Top of the morning to you. Top of the month to you. Or is it? What is a month? Anyway, what is this strange thing called December, friends? I hope you are doing well wherever in the world you are during these crazy times. I guess I'll start with a little astrology. Although all things are astrology, because I want to get a little astronomical today and speak about time. This always happens for me when calendars flip, asking what is a month, for example. Especially when you get a month called December, which starts with Dec, which means 10, and yet we call it the 12th. What a strange thing. Anyway, there's a lot of happenings energetically today in this code, this translation of the heavenly happenings we call astrology. So I'm going to read a couple of things I've recently written. Neptune is stationed direct. Pisces, Neptune is stationed direct. Well, what a blessing to live in a time where Pisces is passing through Neptune. Wait, can that happen? Yes, that's just how these things work, right? Neptune doesn't care about your rules, and nor does Pisces. Things should get reversed and just, Lewis Carrolled all about. So I guess the sign is moving through the planet after all. Anyway, Neptune will not be in Pisces forever. It's not every human lifetime that will experience that happening of Neptune moving through this sign that seems so Neptunian. Neptune has a 156-year course, if we talk about Earth years, right? So Neptune's been in Pisces for quite some time. Sometimes it's hard to know if this is a blessing or a curse. Seems to be all sorts of delusions in the world in Neptune, which is a beautiful, I think, planet of oneness and higher ideals of spirit, is also confusion, delusion, and oftentimes so many media manipulation, poisons, and other things that I'd rather not speak by name in fear of having this video just completely eradicated from interspace. So I'll read instead what I wrote, and I feel this is true in my heart. It's nice when we're talking Neptune or Pisces to get into that place and try to turn the thoughts off a little bit. I wrote, visit the water today. Bring an offering of gratitude and leave with the memory that you are entirely loved by all that is. And I stand by that. This is a statement of faith. Faith for me is a deep belief in things we cannot see. It is not a belief in what I'm being told to believe. That's belief. Faith is, I think, something that comes really through, it's hard to say experience. That will certainly be the case for many. But I feel it is a very personal thing. So I'll leave that there. The moon squares Saturn today, December 1st, and then opposes Uranus. So when we have long-standing happenings like Neptune moving through a sign, which is no short ordeal, that long happening will be excited moonfully when the moon comes around and says, look here. I mean, especially consider Neptune, right? When the moons conjoin Neptune, you can't see Neptune with your eye ever. You need a telescope. But when the moon is there, we can look through and towards the moon and know, right? It's like the gift of these charts that we have. When we have long-standing outer planet aspects like Saturn squaring Uranus, where it's a very significant stage in their synodic cycle, we had Saturn-Uranus conjunctions in Sagittarius and very late Sagittarius at the galactic center in the late 1980s. And now we're in this kind of third term of that cycle. Saturn in the closing square with Uranus. And that's like a long-standing thing. So we can look at when the alignments are exact or near exact and say, okay, those are going to be the most powerful times of this year plus, astrological energetic. But we can also see when it is stimulated by other planets. Saturn and Aquarius and Uranus and Taurus. Well, what happens when you have a Scorpio new moon that's opposite Uranus and square to Saturn? Won't that bring us into a heightened experience of that Saturn-Uranus energy that day? Or wait, perhaps that month, since a new moon itself is a seed for the month ahead. But what is a month? Well, let's get back to that. Or let's bring the moon back to that new moon seed. And that will happen in about, let's do some math, 18 hours time. It's a thing that I have not yet found a term for in the astrological texts that I've read, new or old. I find it to be incredibly powerful, and it brings us into a very different definition of a month than the one that my calendar holds, or the one that many of us participate with as astrologers, or the 2 or 3. Okay, so let's get into that a bit. So the new moon was at like 12 plus Scorpio. So when the moon gets all the way around the zodiac and back to that scene of the new moon seed, what happens? And this is called a sidereal month. Really, depending on the zodiac that you're looking at, it might better be referred to as a tropical month. But the sidereal and tropical months are almost exactly the same amount of time. So let me tell you what the difference is between them. And is that where we want to begin? Why not? Okay, because when we're talking about months, it sure feels like the month, should be in the consideration astronomically. And let me even rewind. What is time? So I started this speaking about Neptune moving through Pisces. I actually started with Pisces moving through Neptune, which I think is a decent image of when perhaps we take that faith in spirit a little too far for this world in which we reside and embody, earth, bones and skins and such. We often hear from folks that time is an illusion. And I hear it and I'm like, oh, where are those wrinkles coming from? Or does the sun not rise on your planet? And I honor that perhaps and most likely there is a greater truth than what we are experiencing right here. I mean, I have certainly broken through to many different levels of realization that the world that was presented to me in school and in youth was very limited to what's actually happening around here. And I very much honor the truth, it has to be truth, that there's a lot more going on than that which I can see. I mean, I've had some experiences that helped me see things that I typically cannot, and it's very much changed my, opinion. Judgment might be a better word, truthfully, of, that person that I see on a park bench talking to somebody next to them that's not there. Because now I understand, maybe somebody is there, and I am happy that I cannot see the spirit world at all times. It would literally be maddening, So there are other realms, or higher realms, or perhaps higher possibilities of the truth, that there is only one time, and that time is illusion, and that unless we escape the illusion of time, we will never escape the karmic prison of this place. These are the kinds of things that I'll hear from people, and I try to consider them with an open heart, but I'm also very astronomically inclined. And in astronomy, there is time. The earth spins, and so the sun rises and sets, and we call that sunrise to sunrise, or sunset to sunset, or midday to midday, or oddly, midnight to midnight, a day, right? And that's a very like real happening in this real world. Like a day is undeniably astronomically true. Now we can get more intricate because there's different types of days, but I'm going to leave it there and let's just play with this idea of sunrise to sunrise. It's a tropical day. What about a year? What about a tropical year? So while the day brings us through the energies of yin and yang, right? From sunrise to sunreach to sunrest to sunroot, day and night, climbing and declining. Yeah, we also experience that seasonally, yes? So sunrise is like spring, and midday is like summer solstice, the height of the light, and sunset is like autumnal equinox, and midnight is like winter solstice. And it is odd that we begin our days in the middle of the night, but that is the time when the sun begins its daily climb. We just do not have evidence of this until sunrise, and an announcement of it before the sun rises and the birds begin to chirp, which is about to happen here in California where I sit. So the yearly energy is a fascinating thing. Now, there's many types of years as there are many types of days when we start learning higher energies of astrology and astronomy, but really in many regards they are one and the same. In astrology, if we really want to understand astrology, will bring us into contemplations of tropical versus sidereal, for example. And there's a lot to know there. Also, sidereal versus synodic, and that's where I want to go next, right? Because what is a month? This is much more obscure. Like a day is pretty clear, sunrise to sunrise. A year, solstice to solstice. Well, let me say December solstice to December solstice, right? Or equinox to equinox, but to make sure we're not talking March equinox to September equinox or half of a year, March equinox to March equinox. You can say a quarter of a year is from solstice to the next equinox, or from that equinox to the following solstice, or from that solstice to the following equinox, and that equinox to the following solstice where you began. But you also have to be careful there, because what you will find is that those quarters of the year have different lengths of time. So this has been one of the great problems that has riddled astronomers for way back in time when we started tracking. Now, solstice is easy to see. If you are in a fixed place on Earth especially, we in this house have an amazing blessing to be able to see the sunset every day of the year when clouds allow. And we can watch the sun moving further and further south at this time, but really slowing down because it will reach its southern extreme at December solstice time. And it will set in a place over here that I'm pointing to off screen that I call Solstice Hill, because it's where the sun sets at December solstice and only at December solstice or thereabouts. And then the sun will slowly begin moving north after the sun stops in its southerly course. So solstice means the sun stops, right? And it does so at the tropics. Tropicos means turn around. So the sun, which has been moving now more than 5 months south since June solstice, its northern extreme will stop at its southern extreme, and slowly from that stopped speed pick up speed on its way to its northern extreme. And you can see this, by the way, in the Cancer glyph. The sun moves south for 6 months, stops and turns around and moves north for 6 months. These glyphs that we use, these sigils, are teachers of tropical astronomy. If you know my work, you've probably seen me relay many of them. Equinox is a much more difficult thing to see. Right? So for the solstices, we can track where the sun is setting and just look at the northern extreme. Okay, that's June solstice. So in the northern hemisphere, that means summer solstice. In the southern hemisphere, that means winter solstice. But either way, it's north solstice. And when the sun ingresses tropical Cancer, it's shining directly above Earth's Tropic of Cancer. So if you live there, actually, it's the day of no shadows. It's when the sun is directly above. If you live north of that Tropic of Cancer, as I do here in California, it's just when the sun expresses its most northern rising on the eastern horizon and most northern setting on the western horizon. And at this time, coming up to south solstice, which is December solstice, you will notice if you go watch the sunrise or sunset that it's rising and setting extremely south of due east and due west, if you know the directions. Now, when the sun sets due west or rises due east, this is equinox time. So if you've mapped the directions, you can know those equinox times of the season in this way. And we've been building stone circles for millennia to track these types of events. How do you learn the direction? So this is like chicken and the egg, because people will say, oh, you just watch where the equinox sun rises and there's your east. But you can't have that and also use east to know where the equinox sun's rising. It's funny, I hear people talk themselves into circles like this all the time. And it's like, oh, I see you haven't done this. I see you haven't, laid out a stone circle or something. I mean, if you do, by the way, how many locations have a perfect view of a flat horizon? Yeah? I mean, so like where I'm experiencing the solstice sunset, as I said before, I have Solstice Hill. So that's not the sun's actually setting into the flat horizon, which I cannot see from this place. Yeah. And so we have our own, or for example, equinox is setting into Mount Tamalpais over there. It's much further away. It's a huge mountain. Well, for here, but and a beautiful, powerful mountain. I mean, to no disrespect. But it's pretty far away, and so it appears pretty small on my horizon. Still, when the sun is setting into Mount Tam, I'm not seeing the sun set into the horizon, right? So there's like a local equinox direction for me, visibly, sun setting on equinox time into the mountain. That's different than due west. Yeah, because the sun hasn't completely set yet. It's just set from my point of view. Now, if I'm going to build a stone circle to track the seasons, I need to build to that direction, not to due west, and that's a tricky thing indeed. The sun is also kind of hard to follow with your eyes because it really shines and you can go blind. And unless the clouds are around, or when the sun is setting or rising, we can see that disk and that orb pretty well. And so in both cases, like either it's the horizon's Earth or the clouds Earth that help us actually see the solar disk. If you happen to be in Antarctica this week, you might see a total solar eclipse, and the moon will really help you see the size and shape of the sun. But it's tricky to work with solar phenomena visibly because the sun can burn your eyeball, and the sun, it's just so bright and shining. It's, on our charts, it's like this point. And where the point of the chart is like the middle of the sun, right? Well, the sun is not some point in the sky. It's a disk, and it's like a radiant disk, right? It's kind of a tricky thing to track visibly. The way that we tell time at night is watching the stars rise and reach and rest, or watching the planets also moving against that backdrop of stars, especially moon, who moves so quickly. The way we tell time by day, sure, is watching the sun climb to height and then decline from that midheaven place. But if we want to be more accurate with time and preserve our eyes, we ought to turn our back to the light and watch our shadow. And this really, in a sense, is where the clock was born. I mean, you can actually, and this is a northern hemisphere experience, because in the southern hemisphere, the sun will rise and reach and rest and appear to move counterclockwise or anti-clockwise. In the northern hemisphere, that daily motion, that primary motion of the sun and of the sky in general, is a clockwise motion. We used to call clockwise sunwise. Yeah, and the clock is literally set up to do this, right? Now, why it's like 6 a.m. and 12 p.m. and 6 p.m., like the way that we do time now, it's really weird, right? In astrology, it'd be 12th, 11th, 10th, 9th, 8th, 7th houses, right? But you can see that motion on the clock, and you can see that not only by watching the sun rise and reach and rest, but you can also see that by turning your back to the light and watching the shadow, right? So now the shadow starts in the west when the sun rises in the east, but it takes that same clockwise motion if you're observing from the northern hemisphere. And when you begin to do that shadow work, you start noticing some really interesting things. First of all, you get directions. How? Because the shortest shadow of the day happens when the sun is at its daily height. Right? High sun, short shadow. And every day the sun rises, and when it gets to its reach at midday, halfway in time between sunrise and sunset, that daily height of the sun is the shortest shadow of the day. How do we get directions from that? Well, north of the Tropic of Cancer, where I live, and I should say south of the Arctic Circle, because north of the Arctic Circle there are days when the sun does not rise at all. But in temperate zones, okay, in the northern hemisphere, the sun always culminates in the south, and therefore the shadow, the shortest shadow of the day, points due north. And then when I align myself to that shadow, and I can simply literally measure the length of the shadow, draw lines on the ground, and the shortest line points north. And when I align my heart to the north, then I can feel the rise in the east and the rest in the west, right? Bam. And now I can draw that cross on the ground. I can turn around, see south, and see the midheaven by day and night. So when the sun is there, I'm like, oh, cool, it's midday. But again, with the sun, it's easier to look at my shadow. That's when we ring the bell and say it's time for lunch or whatever. That's true solar noon. Sun at its height, short shadow. But if I have that cross in the ground, now I have east and west, and I can use those directions to witness equinox, sunrise and sunset. However, once again, how many places actually have a flat horizon where that sun is not rising from or setting into a hill, mountain, tree, house, whatever it may be? Equinox is a tricky thing. When you start doing this type of shadow work by day, you quickly learn that not every day is the same. Why? Because yes, while the sun is at the midheaven, we experience the height of the light and therefore the shortest shadow. But as we move into the fall, when the sun is falling in the sky, really that falling, by the way, begins at summer solstice, and the sun very slowly, the sun stops at solstice and very slowly starts falling in the sky. And at fall, that fall is in earnest. So the leaves are falling from the trees and the sun is falling from the sky. And so what happens is the sun takes a shorter course through the heavens, and its height of the light at midday is lower in fall and in winter after it begins its climb than it is in spring and summer. So the lower midday sun casts a longer shadow. One way we can certainly see the solstices is through what we call a meridian shadow calendar, which is literally put a stick in the ground And you know what the coolest stick is you, because it walks around with you, right? Turn your back to the light, face the shadow, do the shadow work. The shortest shadow of the day is midday. The shortest shadow of the year is midday at summer solstice, because that's not only the daily height of the light, but it's the yearly height of the light, the glory of the king as it's expressed in some interesting texts that have a lot of hidden astrology. The winter solstice sun at midday is the shortest shadow of the day, but it is much longer because the sun is much lower in the sky. And so again, you get these solstice extremes. Now, it would be nice if the shadow cast at equinox, which is the medium height of the light, either halfway between its highest expression and its lowest, its summer solstice and winter solstice heights, it would be nice if that mid-height equinox sun cast the half, like a shadow length that is in the middle of the longest shadow of the year and the shortest midday shadow of the year, but it doesn't. Equinox is a tricky thing to track. So, I mean, it's easy now. We have, smartphones. Are they that smart? They're really good with time. We've got like atomic clocks beaming information through satellites. This thing says 6:52 a.m. It's okay. When it says 12 p.m., by the way, it won't be noon. It won't be solar noon. But it will be 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And we've standardized time so that you and I can plan to meet, for example, at 3:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Friday, December 3rd, 2021, to talk about eclipses. Oh, I guess that was an invitation. Wherever you are watching this, I invite you to join me for a community discussion that I lead every month here for the local San Francisco Bay Area chapter of the National Council of Geocosmic Research, NCGR. And we have an open, unrecorded discussion every month about things astrological, astronomical, considering the truth that there will be a total solar eclipse the following day on December 4th, then eclipses will be the theme for our explorations. And we'll look at the coming total Sagittarius eclipse at the heart of the Scorpion, Antares, and the associated eclipse family or Saros cycle, and perhaps the last time that eclipse degree was activated 19 years ago through the Metonic rhythm too. So I invite you to join me. I will put, not right now because I need to finish babbling about time, but when that time has run its course, I will put a link in the comments below to a registration link, totally free, if you'd like to come and join us for astro journey in regards to the coming Sagittarius eclipse this Friday, December 3rd at 3:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Now, it's convenient for us to have descriptions of things like December 3rd or 3:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I'm just over in another screen here casting that chart. I can't show it the way that I'm sharing right now. I could also say, hey, meet us when the moon is at 7 degrees and 8 arc minutes of tropical Sagittarius. If we measure that from the center of the earth and not from the surface of your particular location, then that is also a time that works totally well. Let's meet in the exact moment of the coming new moon, which happens to be a total solar eclipse. Like, that works as well. And this is not the place for it because it's a long conversation, but one of my intentions during this go is to help spread awareness and a technique for realigning to natural time. In releasing this weird empires calendar, which has become, by the way, the Empire Pope calendar, right? So Julian Empire, Gregorian really was Emperor Sixtus V and that crew who realigned time so that the Easter wasn't so far from equinox and redefined how you Easter too. We are living generally, globally, not everyone, but most of us, on this Empire Pope calendar, which decides that today is December 1st because November only has 30. Did you learn this one, that if you count from January on your knuckles, the ridges are 31 days and the valleys are either 30 or 28 or sometimes 29 as February? So January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. And we don't make it all the way back, right? Because we stopped over here and counted twice. And there's 4 knuckles when we make the fist anyway. And why should we be punching time? But it's a pretty fun device because it's a confusing thing to say, wait, how many days is March 30 or 31? Well, I know February is that weird month with the extra R and not enough days. So it only got 28. Well, sometimes 29. Will this year leap? Oh, and then it's either 30 or 31, but which one is November? I don't want to miss my anniversary. Wait a second. It's like, so it's just like, get the knuckles out and punch time. And it's weird that you get that July, August both have 31. Why? Julius Caesar, Augustus Caesar. I'm surprised that they didn't give themselves 33. I shouldn't say themselves because only one of those emperors did that thing, who was Julius, wanting to honor himself and Augustus. And that's why December, even though decade, decimated, decan, if you speak astrology, decimal, is 10. How the heck do we align the 12th month of the year to the number 10? Octagon, that's 8. Why is 8 the 10th month? What? And it's because a couple months were thrown into the mix. Which means, my friends, there used to be 10. 10 months of 36 days. Right? The calendar, the year was decimated. It was split into tens. 10 months of 36 days, that's only 360, and you have another 5.242. What do you do about that? And so there's been different treatments of so-called days out of time, and I don't want to get into too many calendar systems right now or get too intricate, but it's a strange thing that we're literally living in this like etymological perversion of celebrating the 12th month of the year with a number that says 10, or a name that has 10 encoded into it. I mean, it's just a very, actually, minor evidence of the weird, cacophonous disharmony of our calendar. Speaking of 10, the calendar, many centuries ago, depending on where you lived, introduced 10 days to get realigned. And the reason why is the Julian calendar, right? Once the empire was like, oh yes, 10 months, that's fine, but we need one named for Julius and one for Augustus, so welcome to July and August. Let's just throw those in here, right? It will still begin the year with Janus, January, Janus, the god that looks forward and back, right? Why not begin at a solstice or an equinox? That is such a strange thing. You know, December equinox is a global moment for the whole earth. Midnight in your time zone on January 1st, on your side of the date line, is a total local experience. or at least a meridian, a north-south line of longitude experience. So if we want to get global, we might want to realign ourselves to global time. All right, but it's a confusing thing, and one of the reasons why is we have this 365 days a year, not 360, which would be nice for one day for each degree of a circle. And it's not 365, but it's 365 and a quarter. So thought the Julian calendar, but they were wrong. It's 365.242199. But who's counting? We are, or we better, if we want to keep time. Because the Julian calendar assumed 365 and a quarter year and just treated that quarter year by introducing one leap day every 4 years, which inherently is like adding a quarter day every year. There's more organic ways to do this, by the way, but that works, kind of. It would if the year was 365 and a quarter days long, but it's not. And so what happened is the calendar started precessing against the seasons. Or was it processing? Either way, Easter left equinox, and that can't be. Like, Easter is named this for a reason. The sun is due east of the center of the earth at March equinox time, when it passes over the celestial equator. Passover, Easter, Oester, where that comes from, Oeste, the god of the east, of the dawn. These are directional phenomena, cardinal phenomena. Now, Passover is not going to happen right at equinox because this is within a solely lunar calendar that honors months as months. And Easter is now what? The first Sunday, which is fun because it's solar worship. So we want to do the magic of the days of the week, Sunday, after full moon, after equinox. So, I mean, I love that the way that holiday, holy day, is now observed is honoring many things. One, Earth, Sun, that's the tropical year, so equinox. Another, Earth, Moon, Sun, a month by lunation, new moon to new moon, or in this case, full moon to full moon, right? So we get the moon in there, and then Sunday. So we get these magical 7 days of the week. Now, why 7 days in a week? What is a week? I mean, astronomically, day and year is strong. Week, kind of weak. Month, what the heck is a month? Happy December, friends. The week is a quarter of a month. No, it's not. Well, it depends on what you consider a month to be. You know, it's a quarter of a month on those years where February has 28. That's an interesting thing with which to play. Speaking of play, hello, Isabel. Okay. We should be playful when we consider these strange things. A week and 7 days, and the 7 days of creation, and the 7 visible lights? Or is it that it's about a half of a fortnight, which would be the time between new moon and new moon, or visibly full moon and full moon, although truthfully a full moon is kind of itself hard to see. The moon the day before or the night before and the night after looks full too. But the full moon rises right at sunset, so that's when you know the moon is full. Oops, celestial latitude arranges the truth that unless it's a lunar eclipse, the exact full moon does not rise at sunset or set at sunrise. And that's taking us to higher levels of astronomical awareness, which is necessary for us to really understand time. You know, in fact, at the Gregorian Advent and before, when, you know, the holy ones were realizing that Easter was no longer aligned to equinox and this wasn't cool, they had to go dust off the old astrology texts. The very ones that they had burned and buried, right? Because this had been figured out well before, but forgotten as we aligned our time to a nice, precise, 10 months of 36 days, and that's when you go get your fucking taxes. I bet, or distribute the water or whatever it may be. You know, there is a sense to having, in an ordered civilization, ordered time. The issue is the order, the divine order of the heavenly happenings is not tuned to your Swiss geared clocks, my friends. The hands of this heavenly clock have interesting shifts in their speed. So as I said some time ago, the sun, well, what I said was this: the time between the quarters of the year, if you're counting those quarters as solstice to equinox, equinox to solstice, that solstice to the following equinox, that equinox to the following solstice where you began, those quarters of the year do not express an equal amount of days. What? Why? Well, the reason why is that Earth's orbit, like all planetary orbits, is not circular. If Earth orbited the sun in a perfect circle, our experience would be that the sun orbiting us is perfectly paced. We teach this in astrology, 1 degree per day. Well, 360 degrees of the zodiac, 365.242 days, that doesn't work. And you can't just divide 365.242 by 360 and show the real speed either, because Earth's orbit is not a circle, it is an ellipse. The Earth is closest to the sun in what we currently call, in this time of our experience, in what we currently call early January. So there's like one kind of convenient astronomical truth of starting our years in this middle of Northern Hemisphere winter, well, the beginning of the winter, depending on how you define seasons in your calendar, but not quite the solstice. What? But maybe it's the 12 days of Christmas or Epiphany, or I don't know, right? This January 1st thing, it's actually when in our current lives the Earth is closest to the sun, which in the Northern Hemisphere offers some relief a little bit in the cold winter time. Because why is it winter? Well, if this is the sun and this is the Earth, which I will depict rather than as the sphere that she is, but her pole, at summertime the pole is leaning towards the sun, at wintertime leaning away. Like, that is what winter solstice is. And for the Northern Hemisphere, that's December solstice, right? When the Southern Hemisphere's southern pole is leaning towards the light. And so the Northern Hemisphere is maximum shadow and maximum length of night and cold. And so it's helpful in the Northern Hemisphere that while that's happening in early January, we're also closest to the sun. We're furthest away around July 4th, the way that we do time in the Julian Caesar's calendar, in the Empire Pope's calendar. When the Earth is closest to the sun in July, the Earth is moving faster in her orbital speed, and therefore, in Earth's point of view, the sun is moving faster through our zodiac. When Earth is furthest away, wait, I just said the wrong time. Earth is furthest away in July, sun is slowest through the zodiac. Earth is closest to the sun in early January, sun is fastest through the zodiac. And there's a notable difference. I mean, the fast sun is like a degree and a minute per day, and the slow sun gets down to like 57 minutes per day and change. And this provides significant difference. So it's not as easy as just dividing the year into fours by time. But what about by space? And this is the gift of the zodiac. Because one definition of a year, speaking of the awakening sun, one definition of a year is the sun moving around the zodiac. which actually is the Earth moving around the sun. Like, that's a good definition of a year. That's a tropical year if you're using a tropical zodiac, or a sidereal year if you're using a sidereal zodiac and the stars. For the tropical, the tropicos, and the seasons, the solstices. For the sidereal, sun aligned to a star. Well, good luck seeing that. And while I don't want to speak about the intricacies of tropical versus sidereal realities in this moment, I just want to at least state that there are differences therein. Good morning, Koa.
Good morning, Dee.
Right to the astronomy tower, huh?
Yeah.
That's what I'm up to. You want to come in here? I don't think you do. Right. Walk with me. So, hello, sunshine. Let's talk about months, or let's actually talk about solar months. Solar months, this is an amazing thing we can do. And we say it in astrology, it's Sagittarius season, Sagittarius month. Has nothing to do with the moon. It's a sun month. Is that cool? Shouldn't we call them sunths instead of months then? It's tricky to do months and weeks, kind of weak, while the day and the year are so astronomically strong and obvious, though they have their intricacies. So the sun does not move through every sign. Let's just talk about tropical signs, where the sun is now at around 10 degrees Sagittarius and at the heart of the Scorpion. And that's okay. That signs and constellations are different things. If you're tracking the sun through the constellations, your months are going to be incredibly erratic in their lengths. That's like NASA's idea of what astrology should be. Anyway, the sun will spend a different amount of time moving through the 30 degrees of zodiacal space that we call Sagittarius than it takes to move through the 30 degrees of zodiacal space that we call Capricorn, or Aquarius, or Pisces, or Aries. When Earth is closest to the sun in early January, the sun is moving faster through the zodiac. So, a beautiful truth of solar months, and let's describe them as the time, a beautiful truth of solar months, and let's describe them as the time required for the sun to move through a sign, is that space, that travel through space is equal. It is 30 degrees of ecliptic, which we can envision as a circle. Because the orbit is not circular but rather elliptical, it's a different amount of time for the sun to travel through that same amount of space that we call a sign in regards to the different signs. Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, Aries, Taurus, like they are different lengths of time. How different? Well, let me divide 365.242 by 360. And we get 1.01456. Okay, so that's like the sun's daily distance on average during the year. If I multiply that by 30 degrees, then I'm seeing that a space month, sun through a sign, on average, if we just divide the year by 12, is 30.44. Maybe this 30 and 31 days in a month isn't entirely wrong. not if we're talking solar months. There's 30.44 days in an average solar month. The sun moving 1/12 of the zodiac, in other words, through a sign. So if you consider like sun through Sagittarius to be a month, sun through Capricorn to be a month, sun through Aquarius to be a month, then this thing of 30 or 31 days in a calendar month actually is not completely in disagreement with astronomy, contrary to what many out there will teach in their 13 moon calendars, etc. So it's a valid attempt to do solar time. The issue is the way that they are grouped and switching between 30 and 31. Why would you do that? You would do that to keep pace with the average length of a month being about 30.5 days. I mean, you could do a half day, right? You could say, okay, this month we're beginning every day at sunrise. And then next month, we're going to begin every day at sunset. So you get that half day of sunrise to sunset, But it would be tricky. I think there's a good idea of doing so-called leap days organically by having a year of sunrise, followed by a year of midday, followed by a year of sunset days, followed by a year of midnight days. And there are some kind of very modern suggestions that perhaps that's what the Maya were up to, or other Mesoamerican time day keepers. And that's a story for another time, but one that's, I think, very worthy of our explorations. Because this long rap, with all of its science and intricacies and numbers, really is about the challenges of, but more importantly, the intention for returning to a more natural time. And in one way, actually in several, astrologers are doing this whether they are aware of it or not. Simply tracking the sun through the signs of the tropical zodiac and considering that to be a shift in energy is describing different divisions of space-time that's actually more natural than the 30, 31, 30, 28, whatever. I even just said that wrong because it's tricky to keep, But that being said, since a 12th of a tropical year is like 30.44 days, alternating between 30 and 31 is not completely incorrect. And since 30.44 is closer to 30 than 31, you're going to have to lean towards 30 or just throw in some weird number like 28. Well, let's talk about 28. Because many will say, well, that's how long a true month is. And that's why a week, because a week, 7 days, is a fourth of that. But what is a true month? Or let's rewind and talk about the sun one more time. Wouldn't it be nice if December 1st meant the first degree of Sagittarius? Wouldn't that be great? Instead, it's December 1st and the sun's at 10 Sagittarius. What happened there? And I had said this thing that I didn't spend enough time with before, that at the Gregorian reform, they threw 10 days into the calendar. And, a lot of people resisted it because it was like the Pope's advent, right? And they were messing with their holy days. Or, what do you do with a Puritan country who's been the crown resisting the church for so long? Do you really accept their time? You should battle against it, right? What if you are revolting against the crown that is revolting against, you see what I mean? It gets really tricky and political. And time actually is this very political thing. Consider the truth that we have just elected Greenwich, London, UK as the prime meridian. What? Hello, Empire. Oh, I see you're not seated in Rome anymore. I digress. It's so funny. I'm looking at a book on my shelf called Empires of Time, just as I say that, because it's aligned with my teacup, which is how I keep time around here, in cups of tea. All right. the Gregorian Advent, right? So in some places it went from October 4th to October 14th, right? So if your birthday was October 8th, so sorry. How many birthdays were celebrated either on the 4th that year or on the next day, which was the 14th? Why did they have to do this? Because the Julian calendar, which considered the year to be 365 and a quarter days, was wrong. 365.25, it is not. 365.2422, much closer, and there's a very mild difference between one year to the next. The way we're doing leap years now is really interesting to deal with the truth that it's not 0.25. We do a leap day every fourth year, which is 0.25, unless that year is divisible by 100. Unless the year is also divisible by 400. And then there's another trick that you have to pull off every few millennia. And it does a decent job, actually. But in a very kind of chaotic and erratic way. So just throwing in 10 days, like it would be nice to think about, oh, see, back in the day it turned December 1st and now it's the first degree of Tropical Sagittarius Sun. No, it actually, I think, went the other way. I was thinking about this before I hit record. This is what happens in my head, by the way, when I'm not live. So welcome into this weird world. But like if we just decided today, December 1st, as the Pope decided my calendar should be, to add another 10 days now and call it December 11th, and the sun's at like 10 Sag, we're closer. Like, why don't we just throw in 9 days right now, and then we will have these perfect solar months where when it turns January 1st, that's the sun moving to the first degree of Capricorn, and when it turns February 1st, that's the sun moving to the first degree of Aquarius. It's not going to work anyway. It would be nice to be closer, I think. These days we're like, oh, see, it begins on the 21st. And you know, there's this cheap rule that's really fun. You just add 10 to the calendar date to get to where the sun is in the zodiac, right? So today's the 1st, I add 10. The 11th, the sun is at 11 degrees Sagittarius. No, but it's real close. And you'll always get within 3 degrees. And what you'll find if you play that game of just add 10 to the Gregorian calendar date and compare that to the sun's current tropical zodiac degree, you will find there are times in the year where it's right on and times where it's like much further off, a few days off. And you will start learning the truth about elliptical orbits if your mind is open. Okay, thank you, sun. Let's talk about moons. Hello, moon. Let's talk about moons. Oh wait, hello sun and stars. Anyway, oh, selenite. This is named for Selene. Good. Okay, how about moons? Which are changing in phase in that whole trip, right? Why? Because it's the relationship of the moon and the sun. But there are many moons. So one is simply moon aligned to the plant, going around the earth and getting back to the plant. Okay, sidereal month. Moon aligned to faraway stars. Another month, which is almost exactly the same amount of time because very little precession happens in a month, is a tropical month, which is moon to align to, let's say this is, 10 degrees Scorpio and getting back to 10 degrees Scorpio. That's the moon getting around the earth, in this case played by my face, and that's a sidereal month. Okay, well, let's say the new moon, so moon aligned to sun, into the next moon sun. Now, first of all, you can't see that with your eyes unless you happen to be at a place on earth where you are witnessing a solar eclipse, and the next month won't be a solar eclipse anyway. Very rarely would be the case, and I'm not sure, and I'd love to research this, whether in the rare cases of solar eclipse seasons, if you could ever see the two solar eclipses, partial solar eclipses are surrounding what in that case would definitely be a total lunar eclipse from the same place on Earth. Even if you don't want to plan your calendar that way, it's going to be a very rare, once in a lifetime or probably many generations experience. New moon is no moon. Why? Because the moon is lost under the beams of the bright sun. So any true solely lunar calendar that was doing this observationally actually starts with Diana's bow, the young crescent moon, the waxing crescent moon, which we see in the sunset west. The day after, sometimes 2 days after the moon-sun conjunction, the new moon alignment in the chart, right? It's easy to track now that we have softwares and tables and things, right? If you want to do this with your eyes, new moon is no moon, and you're going to have to wait for the next day and see that moon if clouds allow in the sunset west. And interestingly, many of the cultures that were keeping solely lunar calendars therefore began their days when? At sunset. Why? Because that's when the month begins, because that's when you see the moon, who is now separated far enough from the sun to show you her smile. Diana delivering Apollo's birth, moon reflecting sunlight to earth. And then you go, and next time you see moon smile in that way in the sunset west, the next month has begun. That's a solely lunar calendar, tuning its months to actual lunar, actually lunisolar or solely lunar phenomena, which is the lunation, right? So moon star to moon star, sidereal month, moon with our star called sun, back to moon sun is a different amount of time. It wouldn't look like it if my head, which is representing the earth, was standing still like this, but it's not, right? I'm orbiting too, which makes it look like the sun is moving through my zodiac. So from one moon sun conjunction, new moon, to the next is longer than moon orbiting the earth. And that's why in about 17 and a half hours time, the moon will return to the scene of the last new moon seed, 12 degrees tropical Scorpio. And yet it will not be new moon again, because the earth has not stopped spinning or orbiting for me, and so the sun has continued moving through space. So the moon has to get all the way around and align to the star that the previous new moon was aligned to, but then move another few days to get to the star we call ours, the sun. New moon to new moon, right? A lunation, which is a really beautiful expression for a month. It's not 28 days, contrary to many internet idiots who apparently have never gone outside and actually watched astronomical time, but are happy to just regurgitate what they read through bad information. I mean, I'm obviously biased and triggered about this, but there's a lot of beautiful intention out there of, hey, let's return to natural time, and then so many completely incorrect ideas of how we can do this. You know, and if we say, like, let's align to natural time in this unnatural way, why is that any better than the unnatural Pope Empire calendar that most of us are consciously contracted to anyway? It's harder than you might believe. New moon to new moon on average is 29.53 days. 29.53059. But who's counting? We are, if you want to do this thing right, and you can't always do it by counting, because lunations also vary in time. So we want to learn our averages and apply that mathematically, but we also need the mathemagics, which is happening through our experience. And the experience does not always dance to what the averages would suggest it should. It's a tricky thing. What is a month? I mean, is it moon around the zodiac, or moon around from one star to that star again? That's tropical or sidereal month, respectively, and they are just about the same amount of time, 27.32 days and change. And there are 13.37 of those sidereal months in a tropical year. Or is it New moon to new moon, moon sun, meeting. A meeting is a synod. The synodic month is moon conjunct sun to moon conjunct sun. Again, new moon to new moon. 29.53 days. And there are 12.37 of those in a year. So what's it going to be? 13.37 sidereal months in your year or 12.37 synodic months in your year? Either way, you've got to deal with this 0.37 thing, which is very tricky. You know, decimals make it hard. They make it hard for a year. What is a leap day? They make it hard for a lunisolar calendar. What is a leap month? Really tricky consideration. So this solar month thing, the sun moving through the signs, it's easier to keep. It doesn't make it right or wrong. It's just a different thing. And it's not just sun, my friends, it's earth. Right? The reason why the sun is now in Sagittarius has nothing to do with the sun. It's about earth. Do you feel me? Earth, actually, it's literally the direction of Earth's rotational axis in respect to where the sun is today. This north axis pointing to the sun is June solstice. This north axis pointing away from the sun is December solstice. The tropical zodiac is a directional thing where the cardinal signs align to the cardinal directions of Earth. And it's a beautiful way of seeing space-time, and it's not completely equal. Again, why? Because Earth's orbit is not a circle, but rather an ellipse, so the sun does not spend 30.4368333 days in each sign. It varies. And in that sense, varying between 30 and 31. It's like a decent approach. But where do you do your 30s and your 31s? There's more politics in that, really, than there is science. And why should we ever call a thing a month unless we consider the moon? Happy new month. The 12th month of the year called December. I remain confused. What about you?